My name is Vicky and I'm 57 years old. 6 years ago, my daughter-in-law, Madison, slammed my front door so hard the window shook, screaming that I was the worst mother-in-law alive. Since that day, silence. No calls, no visits, no contact with my son, Jacob, or my grandchildren. Then last Tuesday, there she stood on my doorstep with suitcases, announcing they'd heard about my new beach house and were moving in. The audacity made my blood pressure spike. But what happened when she stepped inside? Well, let's just say karma has a wicked sense of humor. Before I share what happened next, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And please hit that like and subscribe button, because this story has a twist none of us saw coming. To understand why Madison's sudden appearance felt like a punch to the gut, you need to know how we got here. When Jacob first brought Madison home 8 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms. She was this bubbly 23-year-old from Ohio, all smiles and sweet compliments about my cooking. I thought I'd gained the daughter I never had. Those first months were blissful. Madison would call me Mom, ask for my recipes, and spend hours talking about wedding plans. I helped with everything from dress shopping to flower arrangements. When they got married, I cried tears of joy, watching my son promise to love this woman forever. But something shifted after the honeymoon. Madison began making little comments about my house being too small for family gatherings. She'd suggest I should sell it and move somewhere more appropriate for entertaining. When I politely declined her suggestions became demands. The breaking point came when Madison cornered me at Christmas dinner 6 years ago. She'd had a few glasses of wine and decided it was time for some honest conversation. She told me that since I was getting older, I should help them buy a bigger house. After all, she said, what did I need all that space for? When I explained that my house was paid off and represented my security, she exploded. Right there in front of the whole family, she called me a selfish old woman who didn't care about family. She accused me of hoarding money while they struggled to make ends meet. Jacob sat there like a statue, saying nothing while his wife berated his mother. That silence cut deeper than any insult Madison hurled at me. The evening ended with Madison grabbing their coats and storming out, declaring they wouldn't be back until I came to my senses. The months after that confrontation nearly broke me. I'd lie awake at night wondering if I was really as selfish as Madison claimed. My house felt enormous and empty without the sound of my grandchildren's laughter echoing through the halls. I tried calling Jacob, but Madison had clearly gotten to him. Our conversations became stilted and brief. When I suggested meeting for coffee, he always had an excuse. Within 6 months, the calls stopped altogether. I'd lost my son, my grandchildren, and the family I thought we'd built together. That first year was the darkest period of my life. I considered selling the house and giving them the money just to have my family back. But my sister Patricia talked sense into me during one of my lowest moments. She reminded me that giving in to bullies only makes them bolder. So instead of wallowing, I channeled my pain into work. Real estate had always been my passion, and I threw myself into it completely. I studied market trends, networked with investors, and slowly built a reputation as someone who could find diamond in the rough properties. My breakthrough came when I spotted a rundown Victorian that everyone else dismissed as a teardown. I saw its potential convince the owner to let me list it and found a buyer who shared my vision. The commission from that sale was substantial, and word spread quickly about my eye for hidden gems. Within 3 years, I was one of the top agents in our city. I specialized in historic properties and waterfront homes, earning enough to secure my retirement, and then some. The financial independence felt incredible after years of worry. Last spring, I decided to treat myself to something I'd always dreamed of: owning a beach house. I'd worked 70-hour weeks for years and deserved a place to unwind. But as I began my search, a mischievous idea took root. The property that caught my eye wasn't exactly what most people would call a beach house. It was a tiny 1970s cabin sitting on a quarter-acre lot beside Miller's Pond, about an hour outside the city. The beach was a narrow strip of sand that turned to mud when the water level dropped. The cabin itself needed major work: sagging porch, outdated plumbing, and a roof that had seen better decades. But it was mine for $12,000 cash. More importantly, it would serve perfectly for the little experiment I had in mind. See, I'd heard through mutual friends that Jacob and Madison were having money troubles. Her spending habits hadn't improved over the years, and Jacob's salary as a middle school teacher could only stretch so far. I suspected that if word got out about my supposed real estate windfall, it might draw them out of hiding. So, I started dropping hints at the grocery store, the bank, anywhere I knew. Gossip traveled fast in our small community. I mentioned my beautiful new beach house and how I was finally living the dream. I even posted a single photo on social media, a gorgeous sunset over pristine sand that I'd actually taken during a vacation in Florida last year. The bait was set. Now I just had to wait. The call came on a Monday evening. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, rang to tell me she'd seen Jacob driving slowly past my old house twice that afternoon. She thought it was odd since he hadn't been by in years. 2 days later, there they were. I was washing dishes when I heard car doors slam in my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I watched Jacob's blue Honda pull up with boxes strapped to the roof and the back seat packed with belongings. My heart hammered against my ribs as Madison emerged first, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the long drive. She moved with that same entitled confidence. I remembered surveying my property like she was already planning renovations. Jacob climbed out more slowly, looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact with the house. Behind him, 2 children I barely recognized spilled out of the car. My grandchildren had grown so much. Emma was now 11, all gangly limbs and serious expression, while little Tommy, 8 years old, clutched a tablet and looked bored by the whole expedition. Madison marched up to my front door like she owned the place and knocked with sharp, demanding raps. When I opened it, she didn't even say hello. "We heard you bought a new beach house," she announced, gesturing toward their loaded car. "We brought our stuff to move in with you. It'll be like one big happy family vacation, except permanent." The sheer audacity stole my breath for a moment. 6 years of silence, and this was how she chose to break it. No apology, no explanation, just an assumption that I'd welcome them with open arms. Madison, I managed, keeping my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. This is unexpected. She brushed past me into the foyer, calling over her shoulder. Jacob, bring the heavy stuff first. Kids, grab your backpacks. My son finally met my eyes as he approached the door. I saw shame there, mixed with something that might have been desperation. Hi, Mom, he said quietly. We're having some financial difficulties, and Madison thought, well, she heard about your beach place. So there it was. They weren't here because they missed me or wanted to rebuild our relationship. They were here because they needed something from me. Again. Of course, I said, stepping aside to let them enter. Family should help family, right? Come on in. Madison swept through my house like she was conducting an inspection. She ran her finger along the mantelpiece, checking for dust, and peered critically at my furniture arrangements. The children stood awkwardly in the living room, clearly uncomfortable with the tension crackling between the adults. Jacob told me you've been doing well, Madison said, not quite making it sound like a compliment. All those real estate deals must have really paid off. I always knew you were holding out on us. I bit back my first 3 responses, all of which would have escalated the situation beyond repair. Instead, I watched as she continued her evaluation of my home, mentally cataloging what she considered valuable. So where is it? She asked suddenly, turning to face me with hands on her hips. The beach house. I figured we'd drive there tonight and get settled in. The kids are excited to see the ocean. It's not exactly on the ocean, I said carefully. More of a lakefront property. Even better. Madison clapped her hands together. Less crowded than the beach. Jacob, start unloading. I want to get there before dark. I watched my son hesitate in the doorway, boxes in his arms. Something in his expression told me he was having second thoughts about this whole plan. But Madison was already directing traffic, telling the children where to put their things, and making herself comfortable on my sofa. Actually, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. Why don't we head over there now? I think you'll want to see it right away. Madison's eyes lit up with greed, disguised as excitement. Perfect. We can follow you there. As I grabbed my keys, I caught Jacob's eye one more time. He looked like a man being led to his execution, but he was still following his wife's lead. Some lessons, I realized, had to be learned the hard way. The drive to the cabin took 47 minutes, with Madison's Honda tailgating me the entire way. I could see her gesturing animatedly to Jacob, probably planning how they'd redecorate my beach house to suit their needs. When we finally pulled into the gravel driveway beside Miller's Pond, I parked and walked back to their car with my most innocent smile. Welcome to your new home, I announced. Madison's face went through several expressions as she took in the reality of my beach house. First confusion, then disbelief, then a rage so pure I could almost see it radiating off her like heat waves. The cabin squatted beside the murky pond, like a toad, its faded green siding peeling in long strips. The front porch sagged noticeably on the left side, and someone had patched the roof with mismatched shingles that created a patchwork effect. The beach was a narrow strip of sand that gave way to reeds and mud about 6 feet from the water's edge. "This is it." Madison's voice came out as a squeak. "This is your beach house." "Isn't it charming?" I said, pulling the key from my pocket. "It has such character. Very rustic, very authentic." Jacob stood beside their car, looking like he might be sick. The children pressed their faces against the windows, probably wondering if they were being pranked. Madison found her voice again as we approached the front door. "Vicky, this is a shack. There's no way we're all living in this cozy cottage," I supplied, helpfully unlocking the door. "Wait until you see the inside. I think you'll find it very educational." The door stuck slightly before swinging open to reveal the cabin's interior. I'd furnished it with pieces from thrift stores and estate sales. A lumpy sofa covered in faded flowers, a dining table that wobbled when you looked at it wrong, and mismatched chairs that had seen better decades. The kitchen consisted of a 2-burner stove, a mini fridge that hummed loudly, and cabinets that hung slightly crooked. Madison stepped inside like she was entering a crime scene. She opened the bedroom closet to find it stocked with my old clothes, from the 1980s shoulder-padded blazers, stirrup pants, and a collection of sneakers that had definitely seen better days. "This can't be real," she whispered, pulling out a particularly hideous purple sweatshirt with sequined cats on the front. "This isn't your actual beach house. Where's the real one?" I settled into the wobbly rocking chair by the window, enjoying the view of Madison's growing panic. "This is my real beach house, the one I bought with my hard-earned money." "What exactly were you expecting?" She spun around to face me, her perfectly styled hair finally showing signs of disorder. "I was expecting something decent, something worthy of the money you've been hoarding all these years." "Hoarding?" I raised an eyebrow. "I prefer the term saving wisely." Jacob finally found his voice from where he stood frozen in the doorway. "Mom, we can't all live here. There's barely room for one person." "You're absolutely right," I agreed pleasantly, "which is why I'm curious about why you thought you could just show up and move in without asking." Madison's composure cracked completely. She began pacing the tiny living room like a caged animal, her designer heels clicking against the warped hardwood floors. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "We drove all the way here, packed up our entire lives. And for what? To live in some fishing shack that smells like mildew." "Nobody asked you to pack up your lives," I pointed out, still rocking gently in my chair. "Nobody invited you to move in anywhere. You just showed up and announced your intentions." She whirled to face Jacob, who was still standing in the doorway, looking miserable. "Say something. Tell your mother she needs to help us." But instead of supporting his wife, Jacob took a step back. Something in his expression had shifted during our exchange. For the first time in 6 years, he was really looking at me, seeing the situation clearly. "Madison," he said quietly, "Mom's right. We can't just invite ourselves to live with someone." "Someone." Madison's voice climbed an octave. "This is your mother. Family helps family. Family respects family," I corrected. "Family doesn't disappear for 6 years and then show up demanding free housing." I stood up from the rocking chair, my patience finally exhausted. "Let me tell you what I've learned in the years since you cut me out of your lives. I learned that I don't need to set myself on fire to keep other people warm. I learned that enabling selfish behavior doesn't make you a good person. it makes you a doormat. Madison opened her mouth to interrupt, but I held up a hand. I also learned that real estate can be very profitable when you work hard and make smart investments. I could afford a mansion on the coast if I wanted one, but this little cabin, this represents something more valuable than any luxury property. What could possibly be valuable about this dump? Madison sneered. It's mine, I said simply. I bought it with my own money and I can do whatever I want with it, including deciding who gets to visit and who doesn't. The implications of my words settled over the room like fog. Jacob's shoulders sagged as he finally understood the test they'd just failed. You planned this, he said, not accusingly, but with a kind of resigned admiration. The rumors about the beach house, everything. I planted seeds, I admitted. But you two chose to water them with your greed, instead of calling to check on me or apologize, or simply ask how I was doing after 6 years of silence. Madison's face cycled through emotions, like a slot machine. Anger, disbelief, calculation, and finally, desperate fury. She pointed an accusatory finger at me, her voice shaking with rage. You're a vindictive old witch, setting traps for your own family. What kind of person does that? The kind of person who got tired of being used, I replied calmly. The kind of person who learned to value herself. She turned to Jacob expecting support, but found only a man staring at the floor in shame. Jacob, are you just going to let her talk to me like this? My son raised his head slowly, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. She's not wrong, Madison. We haven't called her in 6 years. We didn't come here because we missed her. We came because we heard she had something we wanted. That's what family is for, Madison shrieked. No, Jacob said firmly. That's what family isn't for. Family isn't a bank you can withdraw from whenever you need something. I watched this exchange with a mixture of heartbreak and hope. My son was finally standing up for what was right, but it had taken 6 years of separation and this humiliating confrontation for him to find his voice. Madison realized she was losing her ally and shifted tactics. Fine. You want an apology, I'm sorry. There. Now, can we talk about living arrangements like rational adults? What would you like me to apologize for? I asked. She blinked clearly, not expecting the question. What? You said you're sorry. But what specifically are you apologizing for? Being cruel to me 6 years ago. Cutting me off from my grandchildren. Showing up here uninvited today, calling me names. I want to understand what you think you did wrong. Madison's mouth opened and closed several times. It was clear she'd never actually considered that her behavior might have been hurtful. In her mind, she was the victim of my stubbornness. I apologize for us not staying in better touch, she finally managed. Not staying in touch, I repeated. Madison, you screamed at me that I was a terrible person and stormed out of my house. Then you made sure my son and grandchildren never spoke to me again. That's not staying in touch. That's cutting someone out of your life completely. You wouldn't help us buy a house. You didn't ask me to help you buy a house. You demanded that I sell my home and give you the money. There's a difference. Jacob was staring at his wife like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Madison, you really did all that. She's exaggerating. Am I? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a voice message I'd saved from 3 years ago. Jacob called me once when you were at the store. He was crying, Madison. He said he missed me. but that you'd told him I didn't want to see him anymore unless he convinced me to sell the house. I played the message on speaker. Jacob's voice filled the small cabin thick with tears. Mom, I miss you so much. Madison says you told her you're disappointed in me for not supporting your decision to help us financially. She says you don't want to see me until I can convince you to change your mind about the house money. I don't know what to do. The silence that followed was deafening. Jacob stared at Madison with growing horror. You told me she said that, he whispered. You said Mom didn't want to see me. I was protecting our marriage, Madison protested. You were lying, Jacob said flatly. You've been lying for 6 years. The revelation that Madison had been manipulating him broke something loose in Jacob. He sat down heavily on the lumpy sofa, his head in his hands. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have called you myself. I should have known something wasn't right. I moved to sit beside him, my anger melting into relief that my son was finally seeing the truth. You were trying to be a good husband. I understand why you believed her. A good husband doesn't abandon his mother, Jacob said, tears starting to flow. A good husband doesn't let anyone manipulate him into cutting off his family. Madison watched this reunion with growing panic. She was losing control of the narrative, and her usual tactics weren't working. This is all very touching, but we still need somewhere to live. Our lease is up and we've already given notice. That's not our mother's problem, Jacob said without looking up. That's our problem, one we should have handled like adults instead of showing up here with a moving truck. Where are we supposed to go? I don't know, Jacob said quietly. But I know where I'm not going. I'm not going anywhere with someone who would lie to me for 6 years about my own mother. The weight of those words settled over the room like a blanket. Madison's face went white as she realized what was happening. You can't be serious. You'd choose her over your wife. I'm choosing honesty over lies, Jacob replied. I'm choosing respect over manipulation. I'm choosing the person who raised me over the person who tried to cut me off from my family. Madison looked around the shabby cabin desperately, as if the answer to her problems might be hidden in the mismatched furniture. This is insane. You're all insane. Maybe, I said gently, but we're honest about it. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, pausing only to deliver one final shot. Don't come crawling back to me when you realize what you've given up. The only thing I've given up is my self-respect, Jacob called after her. And I'm taking that back now. The door slammed behind her, rattling the windows. Through the cabin's front window, we watched her stomp to the car, yell at the children to get their things, and peel out of the gravel driveway in a cloud of dust and indignation. My grandchildren pressed their faces to the rear window as they drove away, and I waved sadly, wondering when I'd see them again. Jacob and I sat in the quiet cabin for a long time, listening to the gentle lapping of pond water against the muddy shore. 6 years of hurt and misunderstanding hung between us, but for the first time, it felt like something we could work through. I need to tell you everything, Jacob finally said, about how things really were at home, about the fights, about how she controlled everything I said and did. And he did tell me. For the next 2 hours, my son poured out years of suppressed truth. How Madison monitored his phone calls and got angry if he mentioned missing me. How she'd convinced him that staying away was best for everyone, because I was clearly choosing money over family. how she'd gradually isolated him from all his old friends and hobbies, claiming they were bad influences or wastes of time. It was a textbook case of emotional manipulation, and my heart broke for the years my son had lost to it. I kept telling myself she was just passionate about protecting our family, Jacob admitted. But passionate people don't lie about phone calls. Passionate people don't forge that kind of division. What matters is that you see it now, I assured him. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Jacob looked around the shabby cabin and laughed, though there was more sadness than humor in it. Well, I guess I'm going to need a divorce lawyer and probably a place to stay while I figure things out. You know, you're always welcome at my real house, I said. The one with working plumbing and a roof that doesn't leak. He looked at me sharply. Your real house, I grinned. Jacob, honey, do you really think I'd spend my successful real estate career earnings on this place? This is my fishing cabin. My actual beach house is a 4-bedroom contemporary on Lake Michigan. I bought it last month. For the first time in years, my son laughed with genuine joy. You really did set us up. I set Madison up. I was hoping you'd see through it and choose differently. I almost didn't, he admitted. If you hadn't played that voicemail, but you did choose differently in the end. That's what matters. We talked until the sun set over Miller's Pond, making plans for him to move back home temporarily while he sorted out his life. He'd have to fight for custody of the children, but he was determined to protect them from Madison's manipulation. She won't make it easy, Jacob warned. Nothing worthwhile ever is, I replied. But you won't be fighting alone this time. That was 14 months ago. Jacob's divorce was finalized last spring, and he was awarded primary custody of Emma and Tommy after Madison's pattern of emotional manipulation became clear to the family court judge. She's required to have supervised visitations, which have become less frequent as her interest in actual parenting has waned. My son moved into a small apartment near his school, and the kids spend every other weekend at my real beach house on Lake Michigan. Emma loves to walk along the shoreline collecting stones, while Tommy has discovered a passion for fishing from the private dock. Watching them laugh and splash in the water heals something in me that I didn't even realize was broken. Jacob is dating again. A lovely kindergarten teacher named Sarah, who treats my grandchildren with genuine warmth and never asks me about my financial situation. She's earned their trust gradually, never trying to replace their mother, but simply being a stable, honest presence in their lives. As for me, I've learned the value of boundaries that I should have established decades ago. I've learned that loving someone doesn't mean accepting their poor treatment, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. The little fishing cabin by Miller's Pond still sits there, weathered and humble. I use it sometimes when I need to think, or when the real beach house feels too big. It reminds me that happiness doesn't come from what you own, but from knowing your own worth. I've also learned that forgiveness isn't a one-time event. It's a choice you make every day. I'm working on forgiving Madison, not because she deserves it, but because carrying anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to get sick. My energy is better spent on building new memories with the people who choose to show up with love instead of demands. Last weekend, Emma found a heart-shaped stone on our beach and presented it to me with great ceremony. "This is for all the love you saved up while we were gone, Grandma," she said with 8-year-old wisdom. "Now you can give it to us." Children see things so clearly sometimes. I had been saving up love, holding it in reserve through all those years of silence. Now, I get to pour it out freely on the people who value it. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is showing them the door. And sometimes, just sometimes, they'll find their way back to you as the person they were always meant to be. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have opened your door to family members who'd cut you off for years? Or would you have sent them away immediately? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about family forgiveness and finding your strength, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose your own peace over other people's demands. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth isn't determined by how much you're willing to sacrifice for others.